If anyone still believes that occupying Syria, as the U.S. did by deploying military forces, was about stopping ISIS, let me know. I have some gorgeous beachfront property in Raqqa that's priced to move. And still, though, despite all this, despite the sectarian killings, despite the presence of ISIS, despite the fact that a former al-Qaeda leader is now the head of the Syrian government, the U.S. is formalizing its military presence in Syria in a deal with the al-Qaeda-linked government. I'm Aaron Maté with Jalyssa Dugrot, independent journalist. Let's talk about Syria, Jalyssa, something you've covered a lot. But first, let's talk about the problem that the U.S. has, not just in Syria, but around the world, with the kind of allies that it links up with to pursue proxy wars and regime change. This is in Ukraine, and this comes from Declassified. NATO deleted a tweet after complaints it featured a Ukraine soldier with a black sun Nazi symbol on her uniform. A NATO official told Declassified the post was removed when we realized it contained a symbol that we could not verify as official. Yes, the symbol was Nazi because that's who the U.S. has sided with in its longstanding proxy war against Russia inside of Ukraine, going back many years, especially the 2014 Maidan coup, which set off all this fighting and carnage inside Syria. Here's another tweet. Not Ukraine's Jewish president being guarded by a guy with an SS patch. That's German for some Nazi shit. And yeah, there's Zelensky, and a guy behind him is has a backpack with a Nazi symbol on it, which has become a major problem inside Ukraine. Now, this is a similar problem that in Syria, where the U.S. over the years basically tacitly, in some cases overtly, encouraged the rise of ISIS, because ISIS was fighting alongside other groups like Al-Qaeda, against the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad, who was successfully overthrown finally last year. Just some headlines from CNN recently claiming that ISIS was in fact challenging the new government that the U.S. helped install. ISIS claims the first attacks against forces loyal to the new government Syria. ISIS launches first attacks against the new Syrian government. So this was corporate media basically saying that even though the U.S. sided with ISIS and Al-Qaeda against Bashar al-Assad and the regime change war in Syria, that in fact the new government that we helped install, led by the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, they're actually against ISIS. But here's a problem. ISIS guys are still turning up supporting the new government. The new Syrian security forces patrolling Tartus and Latakia, proudly displaying their ISIS patches, making sure they're visible in the frame. So there's a problem here where both the U.S. and the new Syrian government, led by the former Al-Qaeda guy, they claim they're against ISIS, but yet ISIS is turning up still in areas controlled by the government and patrolling areas on behalf of the government. Here's the video. So there we go. Two ISIS guys on patrol in Syria, and in some of these areas like Latakia, these are heavy Alawite areas, and this has been where there have been massacres going on for many months now against Alawite civilians. Alawites being linked to the former government because that was the minority group that Bashar al-Assad was a part of, and there have been a lot of killings, sectarian killings of Alawite groups, because the insurgency that took over the government was led by Al-Qaeda, which had carried out attacks like that before. So that's going on. Here's why it read. If anyone still believes that occupying Syria, as the U.S. did by deploying military forces, was about stopping ISIS, let me know. I have some gorgeous beachfront property in Raqqa that's priced to move. And still, though, despite all this, despite the sectarian killings, despite the presence of ISIS, despite the fact that a former Al-Qaeda leader is now the head of the Syrian government, the U.S. is formalizing its military presence in Syria in a deal with the Al-Qaeda-linked government. And there's been talk for a long time now about basically U.S. and Syria relations improving. Trump recently lifted sanctions on Syria because the job was done. The sanctions helped destroy Syria's economy, helped bring about regime change, now the sanctions can be lifted. And look at this. This is from Reuters. Washington has okayed Syrian plans to merge thousands of foreign fighters into the new army. According to U.S. envoy Thomas Barak, there is understanding with transparency on the issue. He said it was better to keep the fighters, many of whom are very loyal to Syria's new administration, within a state project than to exclude them. So basically, you have thousands of foreign fighters, people who aren't even Syrian, now being formally included into the new Syrian army. And a lot of these foreign fighters, they did not come to Syria to bring democracy and freedom. They came to pursue their own unique and I would say perverted version of Islam, which including to attack minority groups like the Alawites, which has been going on. And now they get the okay from Washington to be a part of the new Syrian army. So, Jalyssa, I mean, you've covered Syria a lot. My first question to you is, why does Washington, who gave Washington the okay to give Syria the okay to decide who can be in their new army or not, especially if it's foreign fighters who aren't even Syrian?
Well, everything that we've seen thus far, Syria must get permission in order to move forward. And we can see the sanctions are pretty evident of that. The sanctions were a reward because Abu Muhammad al-Julani fulfilled what he was supposed to do, which is to overthrow Bashar al-Assad and instill the new regime change government that the United States wanted so far. Syria was one of the last, Arab states that stood actively against Western imperialism. Bashar did not want to sell out to the West, is what I believe. And so it was one of the really large last states standing against that. And it was in the way. There were a lot of projects that other countries wanted, including the United States, big or small, that Syria actively stood in the way of, that Bashar al-Assad actively stood in the way of. And so this regime change was a long time coming by the United States for a very long time. And so they're mom and dad of this project. And so Syria has to ask for permission. And so they've okayed this. And it's pretty evident that they were over the regime change, considering that the US has to okay this. No formal statement was made from Donald Trump, I don't think. Let me know if I'm wrong. It just came out in an article one day that they were okayed to go ahead and integrate thousands of foreign fighters into the new Syrian army, which is a recipe for disaster in and of itself.
Here's what I said about this. Did the people of Syria elect the mandarins of Washington to okay plans for their country's army? No. The mandarins of Washington gave themselves the right to regime change Syria by arming an al-Qaeda-led, foreign-dominated insurgency, imposing crippling sanctions, and sending U.S. troops to loot Syria's oil and wheat. One result is that Washington now gets to give the okay to their foreign proxies' army. But look, this regime change campaign is yielding results for the U.S. Here is a scoop from Barak Ravid of Axios. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told U.S. envoy Tom Barak he's interested in negotiating new agreements with the new Syrian government, with the U.S. serving as mediator, Israeli officials said. And this makes sense, Jalyssa, because Israel played a major role in putting that new government in power in Syria. They armed the insurgency that was dominated by al-Qaeda, which now leads the government. They bombed Syria hundreds of times, including bombing Iranian ships that were trying to break the U.S.-led blockade of Syria by delivering oil so that Syrians could have the energy to power their homes and their cars. So Israel played a major role in bringing about the new Syrian government. So it's no surprise to me that they want to now make a deal with their old friends.
Oh yeah, it's definitely no surprise at all. I mean, the cake was cut before December when Bashar was overthrown. The cake was cut. We just didn't know who was going to get a piece of what. It's really sad, and I've long said this, and I repeat it so much, is that it's just very challenging, Syria, is because the overthrow of Bashar did not come at the hands of the people. It came at the hands of two-time terrorists that are about three-time terrorist group that is backed by the United States and backed by Israel. The sovereignty and security of Syria should not come at, the yes and no of the United States and the condition that Israel gets to occupy territory inside of Syria. I mean, this is ridiculous. But nevertheless, like you said, they've armed and backed, these insurgent groups for quite a long time right now. And I think it's even more telling that Abu Muhammad al-Julani is not fighting back nor responding to Israel when Israel is inside of Syria, bombing their weapon depots, caches, and things like that. And it's essentially to what? It's to completely disarm Syria so that Syria cannot fight back, and then they will become a weak state, demilitarized almost, that they cannot respond to, threats outside of that, and more importantly to Israel. And really quick, this is also evident in the fact of the dissolvement of the 1974 disengagement line that Israel for a very long time had been violating anyways. But on December 8th, Netanyahu made a statement and said, this 1974 disengagement line is now dissolved. And when you guys have a government, we'll go ahead and reestablish it. But he has since then announced that he will not be, removing the IDF from, Syria. And so this was just the plan all along: create the pretext, overthrow, create the pretext, move in, occupy, and take complete control.
All right. Jalyssa Dugrot, we know you have more protests to go cover in LA. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Jimmy Dore Show.
Thank you so much.
Come see us on tour in Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, Liverpool, Birmingham, and London. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.